As far as pre-race or prep strategy, I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to work and train with Navy SEAL type folks over the years, and a few things that I've learned is visualization's huge, having micro goals, and then breathing, and then positive self-talk. Those were like the four kind of pillars. And I'm training for an ultra Spartan race, and I've never done an ultra in my life. I've done the run one marathon, and I'm trying to visualize exactly like what I'm going to go through. And I'm already starting, and it's 5 months from now, to pretend like I was there. And I already am feeling more confident in doing that. I guess my question on that is, have you seen that workers there, did you use some of those tactics in the past, or have you met folks that have?
It's interesting because one of the sort of funny things about the research that I was digging into it, and these scientists doing new studies on how do we push back limits, it's like it ends up coming back to like, oh yeah, this is what sports psychologists were saying in the 1970s, and they didn't have the underlying research to explain why they thought it worked. But the truth is that athletes have always kind of found the techniques, have intuited what works. And what was interesting for me is after Endure came out, I ended up going to a lot of conferences and talking to a lot of people. And the people who like, in some sense, got it or already knew all of that were people from the special forces communities. I met a lot of people, and they're like, yeah, this is what our training focuses on. It's like the guys who show up for training, they don't need like, here's how to do a pull-up, or, okay, they learn stuff about breath holding for sure, especially if you're a SEAL. But the whole training process is all about breaking down a large part of the training process is about understanding that at that moment when you've been sleep deprived for 3 days and you're exhausted and you're tired and you're hungry, that just because you feel like absolute crap doesn't mean you can't just get up and march another 20 miles. Like, your body is capable of it, and they're trying to learn how to unshackle themselves from the brain's very well-meaning protective mechanism. Your brain is trying to do you a favor by saying, if you're that tired, if you're that beat up, you should just curl up in a ball and go to sleep. And sometimes we want to be able to override that. So special forces troops have, that is one of their most important focuses. And the things they come up with look a lot like what successful Olympic athletes have come up with. And so stuff like visualization, that I would say visualization for me, my sense is visualization is a lot like, is kind of where self-talk was a decade ago, where people in the field know it works. It's been around for a long time. It doesn't yet have and people have tried to study it, but it's very hard to study these things. It's not like it's studying a supplement, right? Where you can give a placebo and the real pill and see what works. You can't trick someone into either they visualized or they didn't, and they know whether they visualized, and so they know whether it's supposed to work. It's very hard to do good studies of it. But my sense is people are just starting to try and put the kind of scientific underpinning. And the reason that's important, because you could say like, well, who cares? We know it works. So, why do the eggheads have to feel there has to be studies on it? Well, the reason is because you want to be able to understand, like, what type of visualization is most useful? How much is most useful? One of the questions is, I remember there was a study on visualization, it's probably like 10 years ago, that found people who, they were like visualizing muscle contractions over and over. And then they tested maximal strength, and they were actually tired. Like by firing up the sort of neuromuscular patterns, even without using the muscles, they had created fatigue. And so you could sort of ask, at what point how much visualization is too much? How much, if you're focusing on, visualizing extreme discomfort and pain, at what point are you just leaving yourself tired? When should you stop visualizing? Anyway, so there's lots of questions you can ask about how to optimize it. And that's where the science is helpful. But to me, 100%, no question. It's a powerful and valuable tool. And part of it is, it's like getting back to this idea of like, when you get in the moment where you're feeling discomfort, does it take you by surprise and knock you over? Or is it like, I've been here. I know what this feels like. This is what I expected. And this is what I expected because I've done this before, but also because I've visualized this moment 100 times and I've visualized all the things that could go wrong. I mean, that's another big question in research is like, is it better to only visualize things going perfectly? Or is it better to visualize problems as they occur so you know how you're going to handle it? I should mention there's a book that's coming out in June by a sports psychologist named Noel Brick. It's called The Genius of Athletes. It's by Noel Brick and Scott Douglas, who's a longtime running reporter. And it's basically trying to take the sports psychology techniques used by athletes and broaden them and say, how does this apply to life? And one of the things they talk about in that book was like Michael Phelps's visualization protocol. And one of the things he visualized was like, imagine everything that could go wrong. Imagine that going wrong, and then visualize kick by kick, stroke by stroke, how I will handle that moment. And so one of the things he had visualized multiple times was, what happens if I'm in the Olympic final and my goggles come off and then I can't see? And that happened apparently in one of his Olympic races. I can't remember which one it was. Yeah. And he had visualized it so often, he was like, I'm ready for this. He counted his strokes, so he couldn't see where the end of the pool was, but he knew exactly how many strokes to go, did his turn, touched off perfectly, and won the race. And so anecdotally, you can say, oh, well, yeah, so it makes sense to visualize all the things that can go wrong. But then you ask yourself, well, what kind of life is that if you lie in bed every night visualizing everything going wrong? Maybe you can end up depressed. So there's a lot of interesting like subtleties of like, in what context is it better to focus on the positive, focus on the negative? How often do you do it? So yeah, I think there's still lots of open questions, but I'm 100% on board with that.